Have you ever visited St Mary's Church in Lastingham? It's on the southern side of the North York Moors, a few miles east of Hutton-le-Home. It's a lovely drive to get there. There is good walking on the moors, and the pub across the road from the church does a friendly lunch. In happier times, that is. Or, like us, you might have been there for a chamber music concert as part of the North York Moors festivals. Or, the church is also a centre of ecumenical pilgrimage. You might have visited as a pilgrim, perhaps. But the history of this church takes us back through the centuries to the earliest Christians in northeast England, and forward through different generations of Christians trying to understand and practice their faith in difficult times. There were Romans there. Stones from a Roman building have been found in the churchyard. But the place comes alive to us in Bede's account, written in the early 8th century. Bede writes that, some decades earlier, the King of Northumbria had asked Cedd, a bishop, but also a monk from Lindisfarne, to build a monastery where he, the king, could go to pray. Cedd chose the derelict site of Lastingham, which Bede describes as being amid some steep and remote hills which seemed better fitted for the haunts of robbers and the dens of wild beasts than for human habitation. But, says Bede, the fruit of good works shall spring up where once beasts dwelt, or where men lived after the manner of beasts. Anyway, Cedd chose Lastingham and its Roman remains. Cedd asked to be allowed to spend the whole of Lent praying and fasting on the site before building started, in order to, as Bede puts it, cleanse the site from the stain of former crimes. But 10 days before the end of Lent, the king wanted Cedd to do something else and called him to more urgent matters. So the fasting and praying and the beginning of building were entrusted to Cedd's brother priest, Cynwyl. The continuing history of that monastery is tempestuous and challenged. Cedd was a bishop elsewhere, but he frequently revisited Lastingham, where the monastery was led by his brother Chad. Cedd died there, of plague. Hearing this, says Bede, about 30 monks from his other establishments came to Lastingham, wishing to live and die alongside Cedd. But they caught plague too and died, all except one small boy, who eventually himself became a priest. I do not doubt, writes Bede, that he was delivered from the jaws of death by his father Cedd, to whose tomb he had come out of love for him. This, the late 7th century, was a time not only of plague in northeast England, but also of social and political turmoil, and so it continued. There were disputes within the church between those who favoured the Roman ways of worship and those, like Cedd, who followed Celtic ways. There were struggles for power between different warlords and kings. In due course there were Viking raids and Viking immigrants. We don't know what happened in the end to Ced's and Chad's monastery at Lastingham, but it appears to have thrived, to have replaced early wooden buildings with a stone-built church, and then to have been abandoned after perhaps 300 years. Perhaps the monks were overwhelmed by Vikings, though Vikings generally preferred more accessible sites like York. Perhaps in the end the monks couldn't cope with the isolation and the robbers and the wild beasts of the North York moors. But then, after 1066, came the Normans. The first decades after the Norman conquest were times of great violence here in northeast England, as it now is. The land was fought over for possession by existing barons, many of them Viking in origin, and by the Scots, and, most powerfully, by the incoming Norman hierarchy, who brutally suppressed opposition. The Normans used the church, along with everything else, to assert control. They built their huge cathedral in Durham. They refounded Whitby Abbey as a Benedictine community. And now the story leads back to Lastingham, and to monks who tried, in the middle of chaos, to live their faith. Monks were sent from Whitby to Lastingham, and the extraordinary crypt that is still there under St Mary's Church was built for that new monastery. It is still used, and is a place of great peace. But after 10 years or so, the monks departed again and went to join St Mary's Abbey in York. From St Mary's, a priest would have continued to serve the people of the village in Lastingham, just as, after the Norman conquest, a priest from St Mary's, York, served the people of Stokesley. But monastic life was never simple. In 1132, there was a dispute among those monks in York, and 13 were expelled from St Mary's Abbey. They were protected by Archbishop Thurston of York, a Norman leader who 4 years later, in 1138, defeated King David of Scotland at the Battle of the Standard just outside Northallerton. Thurston gave the monks land beside the River Skell, where we can, in better times, now visit the ruins of Fountains Abbey and the 18th century water gardens of Studley Royal. Those 13 monks spent their first winter living in holes in the valley sides before beginning the development of Fountains, in due course the most powerful Cistercian monastery in England. You know the rest of this story. Fountains Abbey thrived and declined and was decimated by plague and was finally closed, or dissolved as we say, by Henry VIII and Thomas Cromwell. Its site has become a UNESCO World Heritage Centre. It is a major tourist destination. It is a place of quite stunning landscape beauty. Most of its visitors, of course, come for wholly secular reasons, but it is a witness to something important for us in today's church. Through almost 900 years of civil strife and of poverty and plague, from Ced in Lastingham to the dissolution of Fountains, there is a continuous history of Christians who have lived their faith in nightmarish times.